The courtroom was silent. Every eye fixed on the small figure standing before the judge's bench. Clara, 10 years old, with dirt still clinging to the hem of her dress, held her chin high despite the trembling in her hands. "Child," the judge said, his voice carrying the weight of years, "do you understand what is at stake here?" "Yes, sir." Her voice was steady, clear. "But I need you to understand something, too." The judge leaned forward, surprised by the determination in such young eyes. "I did not come here begging for charity, Your Honor. I came asking for work." The words hung in the air like a prayer, like a challenge, like the beginning of something that would change more lives than anyone in that room could imagine. But that moment was still weeks away. To understand how a barefoot child came to stand in that courtroom, defending a family that was not bound by blood, we must go back to the beginning, to the snow, to the desperate walk, to the gate that should have been closed but somehow impossibly opened. The snow fell thick and relentless across the Nebraska prairie. Each flake added to the white blanket that stretched endlessly in every direction, swallowing the world in silence. No birdsong, no wind, just the soft, deadly whisper of winter claiming its territory. Clara's feet had stopped hurting 3 miles back. That was worse than the pain. She knew what it meant when you could no longer feel the cold. Her mother had taught her that, along with everything else, a girl needed to survive in a world that did not care whether she lived or died. In her arms, wrapped in layers of threadbare cloth, Lily whimpered. 5 months old and weighing barely more than a sack of flour, the baby had been crying for 2 days straight. Now her cries had grown weak, thready, like a kitten mewling in the distance. Clara adjusted her grip, pulling Lily closer against her chest. Her own thin coat offered little protection, but her body heat was all she had to give. The bundle shifted, and for a moment Clara felt the slight rise and fall of breathing. Still alive, still fighting. Keep moving. That was all that mattered. 1 foot in front of the other, even if those feet were bare and bleeding, even if the world had narrowed to nothing but white and cold, and the impossible weight of a dying baby. Behind them lay 40 miles of frozen prairie, 40 miles of doors that had closed in their faces, 40 miles of people who had looked at 2 orphaned children and seen only inconvenience. The first house had been a farmstead outside Omaha, where a woman in a clean apron had taken one look at Clara's desperate face and shut the door without a word. The second had been a church, where the minister had offered prayers, but no room. His wife had children of her own, he explained. He could not ask her to take on more mouths to feed. The third, fourth, fifth. Each rejection had carved itself into Clara's memory like notches on a stick. By the 10th door, she had stopped expecting kindness. By the 14th, she had stopped expecting anything at all, except the cold and the snow and the slow, inevitable dimming of Lily's cries. But her mother's voice would not let her give up. "Don't ever beg, Clara." Anna had said this 100 times, maybe 1,000 in those last terrible weeks before the fever took her. Her hand had been hot and dry in Clara's small one, her eyes too bright in a face gone gaunt with sickness. "Never let them see you on your knees. Prove your worth. Show them what you can do. That's the only currency that matters in this world." So Clara had not begged. Not at any of those 14 doors. She had asked for work, offered her hands, her back, her willingness to scrub floors or feed chickens or do whatever needed doing in exchange for a warm place to sleep and milk for her sister. And 14 times the answer had been no. Now trudging through snow that reached her knees, Clara wondered if her mother had been wrong. Maybe pride was a luxury orphans could not afford. Maybe she should have begged, should have wept and pleaded and thrown herself on the mercy of strangers. But it was too late for that now. Too late for anything except this final stretch of road, this last desperate hope. Ahead through the swirling snow, Clara could make out the dark shape of a building. A farmhouse set back from the road with a barn slouching beside it like an old man leaning on a cane. Smoke rose from the chimney, thin and gray against the white sky. Smoke meant fire. Fire meant warmth. Warmth meant Lily might live another day. Clara's legs trembled with each step threatening to give out. She had not eaten since yesterday morning when a shopkeeper had given her a hard biscuit out of pity. Before that, 2 days of nothing. Her stomach had stopped growling hours ago, settling into a hollow ache that she barely noticed anymore. The gate appeared through the snow like a ghost. Wooden posts weathered gray by years of prairie wind. A crossbar hanging crooked on rusted hinges. Wire fence stretching away on either side, marking the boundary between the road and whatever lay beyond. Clara stopped at the gate, swaying on feet she could no longer feel. Through the falling snow, she could see the house more clearly now. Paint peeling from the porch rails. Windows dark except for the flicker of firelight in one room. The whole place had an air of abandonment, as if the people inside had given up on everything except survival. Perfect Clara thought. A place that had given up was exactly what she needed. People who had nothing left to lose were the only ones who might take a chance on 2 children with nowhere else to go. She pushed against the gate. It swung open with a shriek of protesting metal that cut through the silence like a scream. Clara flinched but forced herself forward. 1 step, 2, 3. The house was 50 yards away. Might as well have been 50 miles. Lily had stopped making noise. Clara looked down and felt her heart seize. The baby's face was pale, her tiny lips tinged with blue. Her eyes were closed, and Clara could not tell if she was breathing. "No," the word came out as a sob. "No, no, no. Lily, please, please don't leave me." She pressed 2 fingers against the baby's neck, searching for a pulse. There. Faint and fluttering, but there. Still alive. Barely. Clara ran, or tried to. Her legs had other ideas buckling after 3 steps and sending her sprawling into the snow. She curled around Lily, protecting the baby even as she fell. The impact drove the breath from her lungs, but she held on. Always held on. For a long moment, Clara lay in the snow, unable to move, unable to do anything except breathe and hold her sister and pray to a God she was not sure existed anymore. Then the door of the farmhouse opened. A man stood silhouetted in the doorway, tall and broad-shouldered, with gray threaded through dark hair. He wore a wool shirt half unbuttoned, and his jaw was covered in several days' worth of stubble. Even from a distance, Clara could see the wariness in his posture. This was a man who had learned not to expect good things from the world. He stared at her for a long moment. Then he stepped off the porch and walked toward her through the snow. Clara tried to stand, but her legs would not obey. She managed to push herself to her knees, still clutching Lily against her chest. The man approached slowly, his boots crunching in the snow, his eyes never leaving her face. When he was close enough that Clara could see the lines around his eyes, the gray in his beard, the deep exhaustion that seemed to emanate from him like cold from ice, he stopped. "What in God's name?" His voice was rough, unused to speaking. "Please." Clara forced the word past her cracked lips. "My sister. She needs help." The man's gaze dropped to the bundle in Clara's arms. His expression did not change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Recognition, maybe. Or memory. How long has she been like this? Since yesterday. She stopped crying an hour ago. Clara's voice shook. I know what that means. Please, sir. I can work. I can clean and cook and mend clothes. I can do anything you need. Just please help her. The man said nothing. He looked past Clara out toward the road as if checking to see if anyone else was coming. Then he looked back at her face, studying her with an intensity that made Clara want to look away. She did not. She met his eyes and held his gaze, willing him to see what her mother had always told her was there. Strength, determination, worth. This was the moment, the one that mattered. Everything hung in the balance of whatever this stranger saw when he looked at her. Silas Callahan had spent 3 years learning to be alone. 3 years since Eleanor's death had hollowed him out and left him going through the motions of life without really living it. 3 years of waking up in an empty house, working until his body ached, and falling into bed too exhausted to dream. He had become good at being alone, good at keeping the world at arm's length, good at making sure no one got close enough to hurt him again. And now this child was kneeling in his snow, holding a dying baby, looking at him with eyes that reminded him so much of Eleanor, it made his chest ache. Not the color. Eleanor's eyes had been blue, while this girl's were dark brown. But the expression, the fierce, stubborn refusal to give up even when everything else had been taken away. That was pure Eleanor. Silas had seen that look before. 25 years ago, when Eleanor had shown up at his door, asking for work after her father had drunk away everything they owned. She had been 16 proud, despite her ragged dress, determined, despite having nothing. He had given her a job. 6 months later, he had asked her to marry him. Looking at Clara now, Silas felt something crack inside him, some wall he had built to keep the grief at bay. He could send her away, should send her away. He was not a charity house. He had his own problems, his own pain to manage. But Eleanor's voice echoed in his memory as clearly as if she stood beside him. You have a good heart, Silas. Don't let the hard times make you forget that. Damn it. Give me the baby, Silas said. Clara's arms tightened instinctively around Lily. She's my sister. I know, but if we don't get her warm right now, she is going to die. So give her to me. Clara hesitated for one more second. Then, with obvious reluctance, she held out the bundle. Silas took it carefully, shocked by how light the child was. Through the layers of cloth, he could feel the barely there flutter of breathing. He turned toward the house without waiting to see if Clara would follow. She did, of course, stumbling through the snow on feet that clearly could not feel the ground, using the last reserves of whatever strength had carried her this far. They reached the porch. Clara's legs gave out on the steps, and she fell to her hands and knees on the wooden boards. Silas glanced back, saw her struggling to rise, saw the absolute determination in her face, even as her body failed her. "Stay there," he commanded. "I will come back for you." He carried the baby inside, moving quickly to the stove, where a pot of water sat warming. With practiced efficiency, born of years of ranch work and animal husbandry, Silas unwrapped the child. The baby's skin was pale, her lips blue, her tiny chest barely moving. Not good. Not good at all. Silas had learned basic medical care during his years running the ranch, helping animals birth in the cold, treating injuries, knowing when something was beyond saving. He applied that knowledge, now warming his hands first, then gently rubbing the baby's chest, stimulating circulation, encouraging the heart to keep beating. "Come on," he murmured. "Come on, little one. Don't give up yet." The baby did not respond. Silas checked her airway, made sure nothing was blocking her breathing. Then he did what he had learned to do with newborn calves who refused to take their first breath. He covered the baby's nose and mouth with his own mouth and breathed out gently. Once, twice, 3 times. For a terrible moment, nothing happened. Then the baby gasped, a small, weak sound, but real. Her chest rose and fell more strongly. Her lips began to lose their blue tinge. Silas let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. Not out of danger yet, but fighting back. That was something. He warmed goat's milk on the stove, testing the temperature on his wrist the way Eleanor had taught him when their son Nathaniel was born. When it was ready, he dipped a clean cloth in the milk and brought it to the baby's lips. At first, she did not respond. Then some instinct kicked in, and she began to suckle weakly, her tiny fists unclenched. Her body relaxed slightly as the warmth of the milk reached her stomach. Silas held her carefully, supporting her head, murmuring words he had not spoken since Eleanor died. Gentle words, encouraging words. The kind of words you said to something small and fragile that was fighting to survive. Behind him, he heard a sound. He turned to see Clara standing in the doorway, soaking wet and shivering violently. She must have crawled inside after all. "Is she eating?" Clara's voice was barely a whisper. "Yes." Clara's face crumpled. Tears streamed down her cheeks, cutting tracks through the dirt. She made no sound, but her whole body shook with silent sobs. Relief and exhaustion and fear all pouring out at once. Silas gestured to a chair by the stove. "Sit down before you fall down." Clara obeyed, moving like someone in a dream. She sank into the chair and immediately started to stand again. "I should help. You can sit still and get warm." Silas's voice came out harsher than he intended. "The baby is drinking. That is the important thing right now." Clara subsided, but her eyes never left her sister, watching, monitoring, making sure Lily kept breathing. Silas found himself studying the girl's face as he fed the baby. She was young, too young to be carrying this kind of burden. Her hair was tangled and matted with snow. Her face was gaunt with hunger, and there were dark circles under her eyes that spoke of many sleepless nights. But it was her hands that caught his attention. Small hands, a child's hands, but marked with calluses and old scars. These were hands that knew work. Real work, not the light household tasks usually given to girls her age. When Lily had drunk as much as she could manage, which was not much, Silas wrapped her back up carefully and held her against his chest. The warmth of his body would help more than any blanket right now. "When did you last eat?" he asked Clara. The girl hesitated. Calculating, he realized whether the truth would hurt her chances. "Yesterday morning," she finally said. "A shopkeeper gave me a biscuit. And before that," Clara looked down at her hands. 2 days. 3 days without food, walking 40 miles in a blizzard with a baby in her arms. Silas felt something stir in his chest. Admiration, reluctant and unwanted, but there nonetheless. He moved to the cupboard one-handed, keeping Lily secure against his shoulder. Found bread and dried meat and a jar of preserves Eleanor had put up 3 summers ago. Set them on the table. "Eat." Clara stared at the food like she could not quite believe it was real. "Slowly," Silas added. "Do not make yourself sick." Clara picked up the bread with trembling hands. The first bite was cautious testing. Then hunger took over and she ate more quickly, though she still showed restraint. This was a child who understood that eating too fast after starving could be dangerous. Silas watched her, this girl who had walked into his life like a ghost from his past. He should send her away. First thing tomorrow, he should take her to town and leave her with the church or the county orphanage. That would be the sensible thing, the safe thing. But something Eleanor had written in her journal kept echoing in his mind. He had found it after she died, her last entry scratched out in a shaking hand during those final weeks when the illness had taken everything but her will. If you are reading this, my love, then I am gone. I am sorry for that. Sorry to leave you alone. But I need you to promise me something. Do not let grief turn you into stone. Do not close your heart to the world. When someone needs you, truly needs you, open the door. That is how we honor the ones we have lost, by living fully in their absence. Silas had read those words 100 times. He had never expected to be tested on them. Clara finished eating and looked up at him with those dark, serious eyes. Thank you, sir, for the food, for helping Lily. Her voice was formal, controlled. I meant what I said about work. I am strong, stronger than I look. I can earn our keep. How old are you? 10. She lifted her chin. But I have been taking care of myself and Lily since our mother got sick 8 months ago. I can cook and clean and mend clothes and tend animals. I do not need much. Just a place to sleep and some milk for my sister. 10 years old and offering to work for her, keep like a grown woman. Silas felt that crack in his defenses widen a little more. Where did you come from? Omaha. We were staying with our aunt after Mother died, but Clara stopped, swallowed hard. She did not want us, said we were too expensive, too much trouble. She gave us money for the county orphanage and put us on a coach. I got off at the first stop. Why? Clara's expression hardened. Because I heard what happens to babies in orphanages. They separate siblings. Send them to different families, sometimes to factories. Her voice dropped to a fierce whisper. I am not losing my sister. Not ever. So instead of the orphanage, this child had walked 40 miles through December, snow knocked on 14 doors, and ended up here, at the one gate that should have stayed closed but somehow had not. Silas looked down at the baby sleeping against his chest, then at Clara, who watched him with hope and fear and stubborn determination all mixed together in her young face. One night. He could give them one night to rest and warm up. Figure out what to do in the morning when his head was clearer and the snow had stopped falling. There is a room at the back of the house, he heard himself say. It has a bed. You and the baby can sleep there tonight. Clara's eyes widened. We can stay tonight. Silas emphasized the word. Tomorrow we will talk about what comes next. It was not a promise, not even close to one. But Clara's face lit up like he had offered her the world. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you so much. Silas grunted uncomfortable with her gratitude. He led her down the hallway to the room that had once belonged to Nathaniel. The door had been closed for 5 years. He opened it now and the smell of dust and disuse wafted out. The room was small but clean. A bed covered in a faded quilt. A window that looked out over snow-covered fields. A wooden trunk against one wall. On the nightstand sat a photograph. Nathaniel at 18, serious and proud in his best clothes, standing next to Eleanor with her gentle smile. Clara stepped into the room and stopped, her gaze fixed on the photograph. "That is my wife," Silas said quietly. "Eleanor. She died 3 years ago. I am sorry. And my son, Nathaniel. He left 5 years ago. We had a fight. Bad things were said. I have not seen him since." Clara turned to look at him, and in her eyes Silas saw understanding beyond her years. "My mother died in October," she said. "I miss her every day." They stood there for a moment, two people separated by decades but united by loss. Then Silas handed Lily to Clara. "Get some rest. There is a chamber pot under the bed if you need it. I will check on you later." He pulled the door closed behind him and stood in the hallway, his heart pounding. What had he just done? He was not equipped for this, not prepared to take care of two children, one of them barely more than a baby. But it was just one night, he told himself. One night of shelter from the storm. In the morning he would take them to town and find somewhere for them to go. Somewhere with people who knew how to care for children. Somewhere that was not a farmhouse full of ghosts and regrets. He walked back to the front room and sat down in his chair by the fire. Outside, the snow continued to fall, burying the world in white. Inside, for the first time in 3 years, the house did not feel quite so empty. Silas picked up Eleanor's journal and opened it to the last page, read her words again in the flickering firelight. "When someone needs you, truly needs you, open the door." He had opened the door. The question now was whether he had the strength to keep it open. Morning came gray and cold. Clara woke to find Lily sleeping peacefully beside her color, back in the baby's cheeks, breathing steady and strong. For a long moment, Clara just watched her sister breathe, marveling at the simple miracle of survival. They had made it. Against all odds, through 40 miles of frozen hell, they had found shelter, found help, found a man who had not turned them away. But for how long, Silas had said one night. Maybe he had meant it. Maybe this morning he would bundle them up and send them on their way back into the cold, back to the endless walk from door to door. Clara could not let that happen. Would not let it happen. She slipped out of bed quietly, careful not to wake Lily. Her feet still hurt, but the pain was manageable now. The worst of the frostbite was on her toes, angry red patches that would take weeks to heal. But she could walk, could work. That was all that mattered. The house was silent as Clara made her way down the hallway. She found the kitchen and stopped in the doorway, taking in the scene. Dishes piled in the sink, dust coating every surface, a table that had not been properly cleaned in months, maybe years. Perfect. Clara found matches and lit the stove, coaxing the coals back to life. She located coffee and a pot worked from memory of watching her mother prepare breakfast in their tiny apartment back when the world had still made sense. By the time Silas appeared in the doorway, Clara had coffee ready and was wiping down the table. He stopped dead. "What are you doing?" "Making coffee." Clara did not look up from her work. "And cleaning. This table has a month's worth of dust on it. I told you to rest." "I rested. Now I am working." She finally met his eyes. "You said we could stay one night. I am showing you that we can earn more than that." Silas's jaw tightened. "Your feet are frostbitten. You need to heal." "My feet will heal faster if I keep moving. That is what my mother always said. Work through the pain. Do not let your body tell you what you can and cannot do." Something flickered across Silas's face. Not quite approval, but close to it. He moved past her to pour himself coffee, his movements stiff and careful. "The baby still sleeping?" "Yes, she will wake up hungry soon." Milk is warming on the back of the stove. Clara looked at the pot she had not noticed before, already sitting over low heat. Silas had gotten up before her, had already started preparing for Lily's needs. "Thank you," she said quietly. Silas grunted and sat down at the table, wrapping his hands around his coffee cup. Clara finished wiping the surface and hung up the rag, found the broom and started sweeping the floor. "You do not have to do this," Silas said. "Yes, I do." "Why?" Clara stopped sweeping and looked at him directly. "Because you helped us when no one else would. Because my sister is alive this morning because of you. Because I do not want to go back out into the cold." Her voice dropped. "Because I am tired of walking, sir. So tired. And if working means we can stay, then I will work." Silas studied her for a long moment. Then he stood abruptly and walked to the window, staring out at the snow-covered fields. "1 week," he said finally. "You can stay 1 week. That will give you time to heal up, get your strength back, figure out where you are going next. And after that, we will see." It was not a promise, not even close, but it was more than Clara had hoped for when she woke up. "Thank you, sir. Stop calling me sir. My name is Silas." Clara nodded, filing that information away. She went back to sweeping, and Silas went back to staring out the window, and neither of them mentioned the fact that 1 week could turn into 2. That 2 could turn into 3. That sometimes temporary arrangements had a way of becoming permanent when neither party was paying attention. The days passed in a careful rhythm. Clara worked despite Silas's protests, cleaning room by room until the farmhouse began to look less like a tomb and more like a home. She found her mother's recipes written in a careful hand in her memory and recreated them as best she could with the supplies in Silas's pantry. Lily grew stronger every day, her cries louder, her grip fiercer. She started to gain weight, started to look like a proper baby instead of a fragile thing that might break at any moment. And Silas watched them both with an expression Clara could not quite read. Wary, conflicted, like a man standing at a crossroads trying to decide which path to take. On the 4th day, he found Clara collapsed on the kitchen floor at 3 a.m. She had been trying to bake bread for his breakfast, had worked herself to exhaustion and beyond. Silas carried her back to bed without a word, but the next morning he said something that changed everything. "You do not have to prove anything else. I already see it." Clara looked up from the shirt she was mending. "See what?" "That you are worth keeping." The words hung in the air between them. Simple, direct, but carrying more weight than Clara could fully comprehend. "Does that mean we can stay?" Her voice came out smaller than she intended. For more than a week, Silas did not answer right away. He moved to the stove, poured himself more coffee, added sugar with a hand that trembled slightly. "It means," he said finally, "that we will figure it out as we go." Not a promise, but close enough. Clara smiled, and for the first time since her mother died, it felt like a real smile. Like hope might actually be something more than just a word. On Sunday morning of their 2nd week, Silas announced they were going to church. Clara had not been inside a church since her mother's funeral. The memory made her stomach clench with anxiety. "Do we have to?" "Yes." Silas's tone left no room for argument. "People need to know you are here, need to see that you are being cared for properly." Clara understood what he was not saying. If she and Lily were going to stay even temporarily, the community needed to approve, needed to see that nothing inappropriate was happening. that Silas Callahan was not taking advantage of two orphaned children. She dressed in her best clothes, which was not saying much. The dress was threadbare and patched in multiple places, but it was clean, and Clara had done her best to mend it into something presentable. Lily wore one of the outfits Beatrice Brennan had brought by a few days earlier. The older woman had shown up unannounced, taken one look at Clara and Lily, and returned the next day with armloads of baby clothes her grandchildren had outgrown. "We take care of each other out here," Beatrice had said when Clara tried to protest. "That is how we survive." The wagon ride to Miller's Crossing was quiet. Silas drove with his attention fixed on the road. Clara held Lily and tried not to think about all the eyes that would be staring at them when they walked into that church. The building appeared through the morning mist, white-painted boards with a steeple that leaned slightly to the left. Wagons and horses clustered outside, and people milled about the entrance catching up on the week's news. They all stopped talking when Silas's wagon pulled up. Clara felt the weight of their stares, curious, suspicious, measuring the stranger sitting next to Silas Callahan, trying to figure out what her presence meant. "Chin up," Silas murmured as he helped her down from the wagon. "Do not let them see you flinch." Clara lifted her chin and met the closest woman's eyes directly. The woman looked away first. They walked into the church together, Silas's hand on Clara's shoulder like a shield. People parted to let them through, whispers following in their wake. Clara caught fragments of conversation. "Just showed up. Taking in strays now. Not right man his age with a young girl." Beatrice Brennan waved them over to a pew near the front. She had saved them seats, Clara realized, had made sure they would not have to sit alone facing all those judgmental eyes. "Come, come," Beatrice said warmly. "Sit with me." They slid into the wooden bench, Clara between Silas and Beatrice. Lily cooed softly against her shoulder, oblivious to the drama her presence was causing. The service began, and for a while, Clara could breathe easier. Reverend Webb spoke about community and helping neighbors, and the bonds that held people together through hard times. Clara wondered if he knew how those words would land, given the stranger sitting in his congregation. When the service ended, the whispers started up again. Clara prepared herself for the walk back to the wagon, for running the gauntlet of curious, disapproving faces. But before they could leave, a woman approached. Tall and thin, with a pinched face and cold eyes, she looked like someone who had spent her whole life finding fault with others. "Mr. Callahan," her voice carried across the churchyard. "I could not help but notice your guests." Silas's hand tightened on Clara's shoulder. "Mrs. Harrison, I am sure you can understand the community's concern." Mrs. Harrison's gaze swept over Clara with barely concealed distaste. "A man of your age taking in a young girl with no family. People are talking. Let them talk. It is not proper." Clara felt something hot and fierce rise up in her chest. Before Silas could respond, she stepped forward. "Proper." Her voice came out stronger than she expected. "You want to talk about what is proper, ma'am, Mrs. Harrison blinked clearly, not expecting the child to speak. Clara continued the words pouring out before she could stop them. "I walked 40 miles through a blizzard with my baby sister in my arms. I knocked on 14 doors, 14 families who called themselves good Christian people, and every single one of them sent us away. In the snow, in December, when my sister was dying." The churchyard had gone silent. Everyone was listening now. "Mr. Callahan was the first person who opened his door," Clara said. "The first one who did not look at us and see inconvenience or burden or trouble. He fed us. He saved my sister's life. He gave us a warm place to sleep. So if you want to talk about what is proper, maybe you should ask yourself what you did to help when we needed it." Mrs. Harrison's face went white, then red. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Reverend Webb stepped forward, his expression gentle but firm. "Mrs. Harrison, I think the child has made her point." He turned to Clara, and his eyes were kind. "You have been through a difficult time, young lady. I am glad you found shelter." "Thank you, sir." The Reverend looked at Silas. "You are doing a good thing here. Do not let small minds make you doubt that." Other people approached, then, their faces less hostile now. A farmer introduced himself and asked about spring planting. His wife admired Lily and asked Clara about her mother. An older man clapped Silas on the shoulder and said something that made the rancher's eyes go bright with emotion. By the time they climbed back into the wagon, the tension had shifted, not disappeared, but changed into something Clara could work with. As they pulled away from the church, Silas glanced at her. That was quite a speech. "I am sorry if I embarrassed you." "You did not embarrass me." His voice was gruff. "You made me proud." Clara felt warmth bloom in her chest. Proud. When was the last time someone had said they were proud of her? The rest of the ride home was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet. Comfortable. Like they had passed some test together and come out the other side stronger. That night, after Lily was asleep and the house had settled into its evening rhythms, Clara found herself drawn to the room that had been Nathaniel's. She had been cleaning it earlier, had found a trunk full of old clothes and books, and beneath those she had found something else. A journal, leather-bound and worn with Eleanor Callahan written on the inside cover in elegant script. Clara knew she should not read it. This was private, personal. But her hands opened the journal anyway, flipping through pages filled with neat handwriting. Most of it was mundane: shopping lists, recipes, notes about the weather and the crops, and the daily business of running a ranch. But the last few pages were different. The handwriting was shakier here, as if written by hands that could barely hold the pen. Clara read the final entry dated just weeks before Eleanor's death. "My dearest Silas, if you are reading this, then I am gone. I am so sorry for that. Sorry to leave you alone. But I need you to promise me something. Do not let grief turn you into stone. Do not close your heart to the world. When someone needs you, truly needs you, open the door. That is how we honor the ones we have lost, by living fully in their absence, by giving to others what we can no longer give to each other. Please, my love, do not let me be the last person you let into your heart." Clara closed the journal carefully, her hands trembling. She understood now. Understood why Silas had opened the door that snowy afternoon, why he had saved Lily, why he was letting them stay despite his better judgment. Eleanor had asked him to, had left him instructions from beyond the grave about how to keep living. Clara put the journal back where she had found it and sat on the edge of the bed thinking. Silas had a son out there somewhere, a son he had not seen in 5 years. A son who had left after a fight and never come back. Maybe that was another door that needed opening. Clara made a decision then. A plan began to form in her mind, careful and quiet, built on hope and the fierce determination that had carried her through 40 miles of snow. If Silas could save her family, maybe she could help save his. 2 weeks had passed since Clara and Lily arrived. 2 weeks of falling into rhythms that felt almost like normal life. Clara did her schoolwork at the kitchen table while Lily napped. She learned to ride Penny, the gentle mare Silas had given her use of, though she fell off 5 times before she managed to stay in the saddle. And she made a friend. Abigail Henderson was everything Clara was not: confident, outgoing. The kind of girl who lit up a room just by entering it. She had freckles scattered across her nose and a gap between her front teeth that showed when she smiled. "You are the girl living with Mr. Callahan," Abigail said on Clara's first day at the one-room schoolhouse. It was not a question. "Yes." "That is the bravest thing I ever heard. My father said you walked 40 miles in the snow with a baby." "It was not really brave. I did not have much choice." "That is what makes it brave silly. Doing it anyway when you are scared." They became inseparable after that. Abigail showed Clara where to catch frogs in the creek behind the school. Clara helped Abigail with her reading. They shared lunches and secrets and the easy companionship of children who had found kindred spirits. At home, things settled into their own patterns. Silas taught Clara how to feed the chickens and collect eggs, how to mend fences and groom horses. He showed her the ranch's boundaries and explained which fields would be planted with what crops come spring. He taught her like she was going to be there for the planting, like 1 week had already stretched into forever without either of them quite noticing. And Clara did something she had not done in months. She stopped thinking about survival and started thinking about living. One evening, while Silas was reading by the fire and Clara was mending his work shirt, the words slipped out before she could stop them. "Thank you, Pa." The room went silent. Clara's hands froze on the needle. She had not meant to say it, had not even realized she was thinking it. But there it was, hanging in the air between them. Silas looked up from his book. His expression was unreadable. "I am sorry," Clara said quickly. "I did not mean to. That was inappropriate. You are not my—" "It is all right," Silas interrupted. His voice was rough, thick with emotion. "You can call me that, if you want to." Clara felt tears prick at her eyes. Really. They went back to their evening tasks, but something had shifted. Some invisible line had been crossed, and there was no going back now. Later that night, after Clara had gone to bed, she lay awake thinking about family, about what it meant, about the difference between the people you were born to and the people who chose you. Her mother had chosen to fight for her daughters until her very last breath. Silas had chosen to open his door when he could have kept it closed, and Clara had chosen to stop walking, to stop knocking on doors, to believe that maybe this broken man in this broken farmhouse could be the family she and Lily needed. But what about Nathaniel Silas's son was out there somewhere, carrying his own pain, his own regrets. A family could not be whole with pieces missing. Clara made her decision. Tomorrow she would search more carefully through that room, would find an address for Nathaniel if one existed, would write him a letter. Not from Silas. Silas was too proud, too hurt, too afraid of rejection to reach out first. But from a friend. From someone who understood what it meant to lose everything and be too stubborn to ask for help getting it back. Clara fell asleep with a plan forming in her mind. A plan to heal more than just her own broken family. A plan that would either bring them all together or shatter the fragile peace they had built. She chose to believe in the bringing together part. After walking 40 miles through snow and surviving, Clara had earned the right to believe in impossible things. The gate stood open now, Silas having fixed it during Clara's second week there. He had done it quietly, without ceremony, spending an afternoon with his tools and some new wire, making sure it swung properly on its hinges. "Why now?" Clara had asked, watching him work. Silas had looked up, squinting against the sun. "Because you were right. About it being a symbol. If I am going to open the door, might as well fix the gate too." Clara had smiled and gone back to her chores, understanding what he was really saying. He was letting them stay. Maybe not forever, maybe not even for certain, but he was fixing the gate because he was starting to believe that keeping it open was worth the risk. And that was enough. For now, it was more than enough. The letter sat on Clara's small desk for 3 days before she found the courage to send it. She had written and rewritten it a dozen times, trying to find words that would reach across 5 years of silence without sounding presumptuous or manipulative. In the end, she kept it simple. "Dear Nathaniel, my name is Clara. I am 10 years old, and I am staying with your father on his ranch. I found your mother's journal." On the last page, she wrote about opening doors and not letting grief turn hearts to stone. "I think she would want you to know that your father has opened his doors. He saved my life and my sister's life. He is a good man, though I think he has forgotten that about himself. I do not know what happened between you, but I know what it feels like to lose everyone you love. I know how pride can keep you from reaching out even when you desperately want to. Your mother asked your father to let people in. Maybe she was asking you too. A friend of your father. She did not sign her name, did not give specifics that might make Nathaniel think this was some scheme of Silas's. Just words from a stranger who had benefited from his father's kindness and wanted to pay it forward." Clara found an address in an old letter tucked into Nathaniel's childhood trunk. Chicago. A boarding house on the south side. The letter might not even reach him. He might have moved, might throw it away unread, might read it and decide his father was not worth the journey home. But Clara had learned something important during her 40-mile walk through the snow. You could not control whether doors opened. You could only keep knocking. She mailed the letter on a Tuesday morning when Silas drove her into town for supplies, watched it disappear into the postmaster's bag, and felt a strange mixture of hope and dread settle in her stomach. What had she done? If Nathaniel came and things went badly, if the reunion turned into another fight, Silas would know she had interfered, would know she had read Eleanor's private words and taken it upon herself to meddle in family business that was not hers. But if Nathaniel came and things went well, Clara pushed the thought away. One impossible thing at a time. Life continued its rhythm. February arrived with its false promises of spring days that teased with warmth before plunging back into bitter cold. Clara turned 11 with little fanfare, though Silas surprised her with a new dress Beatrice had helped him pick out and a book of poems he thought she might enjoy. "You did not have to do this," Clara said, holding the book like it was made of gold. "I know." Silas looked uncomfortable with her gratitude. "But I wanted to." It was the closest he had come to saying the words they both felt, but neither could quite speak. That she was becoming his daughter. That this arrangement that was supposed to be temporary was starting to feel permanent. That they were becoming a family. Lily was thriving. 6 months old now, and fat with good feeding, she had started to recognize Clara's voice, turning her head when her sister entered the room. She could sit up with support, and grabbed at everything within reach with the single-minded determination of babies everywhere. Watching her grow, watching her become a real person with preferences and personality. Clara felt the last knot of fear in her chest begin to loosen. Lily was going to make it. They both were. The ranch work became easier as Clara's body healed and strengthened. Her frostbitten toes had recovered, leaving only faint scars as reminders of that terrible walk. She could now collect eggs without dropping them, milk the cow without getting kicked, and even help Silas repair fences without slowing him down too much. In the evenings after supper and chores, Silas began teaching her to read better. Clara could manage simple texts, but he pushed her further. Shakespeare, Milton, poets whose words painted pictures bigger than the prairie itself. "Why do I need to know this?" Clara asked one night, struggling through a particularly dense passage. "Because knowing how to work keeps you alive," Silas said, "but knowing how to think keeps you free." Clara thought about her mother, who had worked herself to exhaustion but still insisted Clara attend school whenever possible, who had believed education was the one thing no one could take away. "My mother used to say something like that," Clara said softly. "She sounds like she was a wise woman." "She was," Clara's voice caught. "I wish you could have met her." Silas was quiet for a moment. "I wish I could have, too." They sat in comfortable silence, the only sounds the crackling fire and Lily's soft breathing from her cradle. These moments had become Clara's favorite part of the day. The work was done, the immediate needs met, and they could just exist together without pretense or performance. She had stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop, stopped expecting Silas to change his mind and send them away. This was home now in a way that went deeper than roof and walls. But peace, Clara would learn, was often just the quiet before the storm. Sunday came bright and cold. They rode to church as they did every week, now Clara holding Lily while Silas drove the wagon. The community had largely accepted their presence, though Mrs. Harrison still pursed her lips whenever she saw them. The service started normally enough. Reverend Webb preached about forgiveness and second chances. Clara sat between Silas and Beatrice Lilly, dozing against her shoulder, half listening to words that washed over her like water. She did not notice the stranger at the back of the church until the service ended. A woman stood by the door, tall and severe in expensive city clothes that marked her as an outsider. Her hair was pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch her face, giving her a pinched, predatory look. She watched the congregation file out with cold, calculating eyes. Clara's blood turned to ice. Eugenia. She had found them. The woman's gaze swept across the churchyard and locked onto Clara. Recognition flared in those cold eyes, followed by something that looked almost like triumph. Clara instinctively moved closer to Silas, her hand finding his sleeve. He noticed immediately, following her line of sight to the stranger. "What is wrong?" "That woman." Clara's voice came out barely above a whisper. "That is my Aunt Eugenia." Silas went very still. His hand came to rest on Clara's shoulder, solid and protective. Eugenia approached with the confidence of someone who knew the law was on her side. She stopped a few feet away, her lips curving into a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Clara, how wonderful to see you looking so well." Clara said nothing. Her throat had closed with fear. "I am Eugenia Whitfield." The woman continued, directing her words to Silas now. "Clara's aunt, her legal guardian." "Funny," Silas said, his voice flat. "She told me you threw her out in December, gave her money for an orphanage, and sent her away." "I made arrangements for the girls' care. Clara chose to run away." Eugenia's smile never wavered. "Surely you can understand why I have been frantic with worry. Why I hired an investigator to find them." Clara felt her world tilting. An investigator. Eugenia had been looking for them, had probably known where they were for weeks, had been watching and waiting for the right moment to make her move. People were gathering now, drawn by the tension in Eugenia's voice. Mrs. Harrison watched with barely concealed interest. Reverend Webb moved closer, his expression concerned. "The girls are under my protection now," Silas said. "I have filed for guardianship with the county court." Eugenia's laugh was sharp. "Have you? How interesting. I was not aware that a stranger had any legal standing against Blood family." "Blood family that abandoned them? I did no such thing. I made appropriate arrangements for children I could not afford to keep." Eugenia's voice rose pitched to carry to the growing crowd. "And now I find them living with a man they barely know. A man with no wife, no female relative in the house. Surely you can see how inappropriate this situation is." Murmurs rippled through the gathered townspeople. Clara felt Silas tense beside her. "There is nothing inappropriate happening here," Beatrice said loudly, stepping forward. "I have visited their home multiple times. The children are well cared for and properly chaperoned." "By whom you—" Eugenia turned her cold gaze on the older woman. "How often are you there, every day, every night? Can you swear that nothing unseemly is occurring?" "I can swear that Silas Callahan is a better guardian than you ever were," Beatrice shot back. "He did not send a child into a blizzard with a dying baby." The crowd's mood was shifting. Clara could feel it. Some people were nodding in agreement with Beatrice. Others looked uncertain, swayed by Eugenia's implications about propriety and blood rights. Reverend Webb raised his hands for quiet. "Perhaps we should discuss this more privately." "There is nothing private to discuss." Eugenia pulled a folded paper from her handbag. "I have here documentation proving my legal guardianship of Clara and Lily Lawson. Their mother, my sister Anna, designated me as guardian before her death. The law is quite clear on this matter." She held up the paper like a weapon. Clara could not read it from where she stood, but she could see official-looking seals and signatures. "If Anna designated you as guardian," Silas said slowly, "why did you try to send the girls to an orphanage?" "I never said I was sending them to an orphanage. I purchased tickets to a children's home where they would receive proper care and education. Clara misunderstood and ran away before I could explain. It was a lie, a complete fabrication, but it was a believable lie delivered with perfect conviction." Clara opened her mouth to protest, but Eugenia spoke first. "Regardless, the law is on my side. The girls will be returning with me to Omaha. Today." "No." The word burst from Clara before she could stop it. "No, we will not go with you." Eugenia's eyes narrowed. "You do not have a choice, child." "The court will have a choice," Silas interrupted. His voice was hard now, carrying an edge Clara had never heard before. "I have filed for guardianship. That means there will be a hearing. A judge will decide what is in the best interest of these children. A hearing I will win." Eugenia smiled again. "I am family. You are a stranger. The law favors blood, Mr. Callahan. Always has, always will." She turned to leave, then paused and looked back at Clara. "I will see you in court, dear, and then we can put this unfortunate episode behind us." The threat hung in the air as Eugenia walked away, her expensive boots clicking on the church steps. Clara watched her go, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. Silas's hand tightened on her shoulder. "It will be all right." "How can you promise that—" Because I will not let her take you. His voice was fierce. Whatever it takes, Clara. I will fight. The ride home was silent. Clara held Lily and stared out at the passing fields without really seeing them. Her mind was spinning through possibilities, each one worse than the last. Eugenia had legal papers, documentation, proof of guardianship. What did Silas have good intentions and 3 months of caring for children who were not his blood? Would that be enough? Beatrice came by that evening with Reverend Webb. They sat around the kitchen table while Lily slept peacefully in the next room, oblivious to the storm gathering around her. "We will testify," Beatrice said firmly. "I will tell the judge exactly what I have seen. 2 children who were half dead from exposure, now thriving under your care. I will speak to the character of both you and Mrs. Whitfield," Reverend Webb added. "The court will want to hear from someone with moral authority." "Will it matter?" Silas asked. He looked older tonight, worn down by worry. "She has legal documentation, blood rights. What do I have?" "You have the truth," Clara said quietly. 3 pairs of eyes turned to her. "What happened to your mother?" Reverend Webb asked gently. "When she died, did she truly designate your aunt as guardian?" Clara thought back to those final terrible days. Her mother burning with fever, drifting in and out of consciousness. The doctor coming and going with his leather bag full of useless remedies. Eugenia appearing like a vulture hovering around the sickbed with papers and a pen. "Mother signed something," Clara said slowly. But she was not really awake. The doctor had given her medicine for the pain and she could barely speak. Eugenia put the pen in her hand and moved it across the paper. Beatrice sucked in a sharp breath. "That is coercion." "Can you prove it?" Reverend Webb asked. "The doctor was there. He saw everything." "Do you remember his name?" Clara closed her eyes, searching her memory. "Dr. Morrison. He had an office on Farnham Street in Omaha." Reverend Webb and Silas exchanged glances. "That is something we can work with," the Reverend said. "If the doctor will testify that your mother was not of sound mind when she signed those papers, it could invalidate the guardianship." "Could," Silas repeated, "not will." "It is better than nothing." They talked late into the night, planning and strategizing. Clara listened and contributed when asked, but mostly she just watched Silas's face, saw the determination there, the fierce protectiveness that reminded her of how her mother had fought to stay alive for her daughter's sake. Silas was going to fight for them. Really fight, not just make empty promises. When Beatrice and Reverend Webb finally left, Silas sat down heavily at the table. Clara brought him coffee without being asked, the way she had learned he liked it. Strong and black, with just a touch of sugar. "Are you scared?" Silas asked. Clara considered the question. "Yes, but I have been scared before. I walked 40 miles in the snow, scared. Being scared does not mean giving up." Silas's lips twitched, almost a smile. "Your mother taught you well. She taught me to keep going no matter what." Clara sat down across from him. "She also taught me that family is about more than blood. It is about who shows up, who stays, who fights for you when it matters. I am going to fight for you, Clara, for both of you. I know." Clara reached across the table and put her small hand over his calloused one. "That is why you are my family now. Not Eugenia. You." Something cracked in Silas's expression. His eyes went bright with unshed tears, and he turned his hand over to grip Clara's properly. "I failed my own son," he said quietly. "Let my pride drive him away. I will not make that mistake again. Clara wanted to tell him about the letter, wanted to confess what she had done, but the words stuck in her throat. Not yet. Not until she knew if Nathaniel would even respond. The week that followed was tense. Silas hired a lawyer, a sharp-eyed man named Amos Fletcher, who specialized in family law. He came to the ranch, interviewed Clara at length about her mother's death and Eugenia's behavior, and left with a list of people to contact. "Dr. Morrison is your best chance," Fletcher said as he packed up his papers. "If he testifies that your mother was coerced, we can challenge the validity of the guardianship papers. But I need to be honest with you, Mr. Callahan. Even with that, this will be an uphill battle. Courts strongly favor blood relations." "Then we will climb uphill," Silas said. Fletcher nodded approvingly. "I will ride to Omaha tomorrow, find the doctor, see what he remembers. In the meantime, I need you to document everything. Every meal you have provided, every piece of clothing, every bit of care these children have received. We need to prove you are a fit guardian." "I can do that," Clara piped up. "I have been keeping a diary, writing down what happens each day." Fletcher's eyebrows rose. "May I see it?" Clara retrieved the small notebook from her room. She had started it a week after arriving, mostly to practice her writing, but it had become a record of their days together. Meals shared, lessons learned, small kindnesses that added up to something larger. Fletcher flipped through the pages, his expression growing more pleased. "This is excellent. Detailed. Specific. Exactly the kind of evidence we need." He looked at Silas. "Your daughter is quite clever." "She is not—" Silas started, then stopped. Yes, she is." Clara felt warmth bloom in her chest at the simple claim of relationship. "Your daughter. Not the girl I am helping, or the child staying with me. Your daughter." After Fletcher left, Clara found Silas standing at the window staring out at nothing. "We are going to lose, are not we?" she said softly. "I do not know." "What happens if we do?" Silas turned to face her. His expression was fierce, determined. "Then we find another way." "What other way?" "I have been thinking about that." He pulled out a chair and sat down, gesturing for Clara to do the same. "There are territories out west, places where Nebraska law does not reach. If the judge rules against us, we could go there, start over." Clara stared at him. "You would leave the ranch, everything you have built." "This ranch has been here for 30 years. It will be here after we are gone." Silas's voice was steady. "But you and Lily are here now. You are more important than land or buildings. But your memories, Eleanor, Nathaniel, everything that matters to you is here. You matter to me." The words came out rough, as if he was not used to saying such things. "You and your sister, that matters more than memories. More than anything." Clara threw her arms around him, unable to hold back the tears any longer. He held her tight, this man who had become her father in every way that counted. "Thank you," she whispered, "for fighting, for caring, for choosing us." "Thank you," he replied, "for knocking on my door." On Thursday afternoon, exactly 1 week after Eugenia's appearance at church, a stranger arrived at the ranch. Clara was in the barn helping Silas mend a broken stall door when they heard the horse approach. She looked up to see a man dismounting, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair and a face that made her heart skip a beat. He looked exactly like the photograph in Nathaniel's room. Older, with more lines around his eyes, but unmistakably the same person. Nathaniel had come. Silas had gone very still, the hammer frozen in his hand. Father and son stared at each other across the barnyard, 5 years of silence stretching between them like a chasm. Nathaniel spoke first. "Hello, Father." "Nathaniel," Silas's voice was carefully neutral, "did not expect to see you. I got a letter from someone calling themselves a friend of yours." Nathaniel's eyes found Clara. "I am guessing that was you." Clara lifted her chin. "Yes. Why?" "Because your mother asked your father to open doors. I thought maybe she was asking you to walk through them." Nathaniel's expression was unreadable. He turned back to Silas. "I also got a visit from a private investigator. A woman named Eugenia Whitfield hired him. She told him you were taking advantage of orphaned children, using them for free labor on the ranch." Silas's jaw tightened. "And you believed her?" "I did not know what to believe. That is why I came, to see for myself." Clara stepped forward. "Your father is not taking advantage of anyone. He saved our lives, gave us a home when no one else would. He is a good man, and if you cannot see that, then you do not deserve to be here." Both men looked at her in surprise. "Clara," Silas started, but she shook her head. "No, I am tired of people thinking the worst. Your father has done nothing but help us, nothing but be kind when the whole world was cruel. And now my aunt is trying to take us away, and we need help. And if you came here to judge instead of to help, then you can leave right now." Nathaniel was quiet for a long moment. Then slowly, he smiled. It transformed his serious face, made him look younger and more like the boy in the photograph. "You have got fire in you," he said. "I like that." He extended his hand to Silas. "I did not come to judge. I came because a 10-year-old girl was brave enough to write to a stranger and ask for help. And because my mother's last words to me were to come home. I should have listened sooner." Silas stared at the offered hand like he could not quite believe it was real. Then he took it, and the handshake turned into an embrace, brief and awkward, but real. Clara felt tears streaming down her face. She had done this. Her letter had brought them together. They moved inside, and over coffee, Clara explained everything. The walk through the snow, Eugenia's rejection, Silas opening his door, the lawsuit, the guardianship papers, all of it. Nathaniel listened without interrupting, his face growing grimmer as the story progressed. "So this woman wants custody so she can access an inheritance," he said, when Clara finished. "That is what we think. My mother owned land in Missouri, 50 acres that passed to Lily and me when she died. And your aunt needs to be your legal guardian to control that land." "Yes." Nathaniel leaned back in his chair thinking, "I know some people in Omaha, lawyers, businessmen. Let me make some inquiries about Eugenia Whitfield. If she is in financial trouble, there will be records, debts, lawsuits, things we can use in court." Silas looked at his son with something like wonder. "You would do that? Help us?" "You are my father. Of course I will help." Nathaniel's voice was rough with emotion. "I'm sorry it took me so long to come home. Sorry I was too proud and stubborn to answer your letters." "I never sent any letters." "I know. I'm sorry about that too." They sat in silence for a moment, years of hurt beginning to heal in the quiet of the kitchen. Clara broke the spell. "Will you stay? Help us fight?" Nathaniel looked at his father. "If he will have me." "Always," Silas said. "You are always welcome here, son." The next days were a flurry of activity. Nathaniel rode to Omaha and returned with a stack of documents that painted a damning picture of Eugenia Whitfield. She was deeply in debt, Her husband had lost everything in bad investments, and they were on the verge of bankruptcy. The inheritance Clara and Lily stood to receive was their last chance at financial salvation. More importantly, Nathaniel tracked down Dr. Morrison. The doctor remembered Anna's death clearly and agreed to testify that she had been in no condition to sign legal documents. She was delirious from fever and morphine, the doctor said in a deposition Nathaniel arranged. I expressed concerns to Mrs. Whitfield about having her sign anything in that state, but she insisted it was necessary for the children's welfare. I should have been more forceful in my objections. With each piece of evidence, their case grew stronger, but so did Clara's anxiety. She found Silas alone on the porch one evening, staring out at the sunset. She sat down beside him without speaking, and for a while they just watched the sky turn from gold to red to purple. What if we lose? Clara finally asked. What if the judge decides blood matters more than anything else? Silas did not answer right away. When he spoke, his voice was steady and sure. Then we appeal. And if we lose the appeal, we fight another way. I will not let her take you, Clara. I promise you that. You cannot promise. You do not control what the judge decides. No, but I control how hard I fight, and I will fight until there is nothing left to fight with. He turned to look at her. You are my daughter now. Maybe not by blood, maybe not yet by law, but in every way that matters. And I protect what is mine. Clara leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steadiness that had been her anchor since that snowy December day. I am scared, she whispered. Me too. It helped somehow knowing that he was scared but fighting anyway. That was what bravery really meant. Not the absence of fear, but the refusal to let fear win. The summons came a week later. The guardianship hearing was scheduled for the first Monday in March, 2 weeks away. 14 days to prepare, to gather evidence, to steel themselves for the battle ahead. Amos Fletcher came to the ranch to prep Clara for testifying. He asked her questions over and over, teaching her how to answer clearly and concisely, how to stay calm under pressure, how to tell the truth without letting emotion overwhelm her. The judge will ask you difficult questions, Fletcher said, about your mother's death, about why you ran away, about your relationship with Mr. Callahan. You need to be ready. I will be ready. Beatrice came by to help in her own way. She taught Clara how to breathe through anxiety, how to focus on the judge's eyes and block out everything else, how to stand tall even when you felt like crumbling. You are stronger than you know, Beatrice said, taking Clara's hands in hers. Stronger than that woman will ever be. Let the judge see that strength. The night before the hearing, none of them could sleep. They sat around the kitchen table, Lily dozing in Clara's arms, and talked about everything except what would happen tomorrow. Nathaniel told stories about growing up on the ranch, about the time he fell off the barn roof trying to catch a cat and broke his arm, about his mother teaching him to bake bread and his father teaching him to ride. She would have loved you, Nathaniel said to Clara. Mother always wanted a daughter. She would have said you were exactly what this family needed. Clara felt tears prick at her eyes. I wish I could have known her. You do know her in a way. Nathaniel gestured to Silas. Everything good about him came from her. The kindness, the determination to do right even when it is hard. That is all Eleanor. Silas said nothing, but Clara saw the brightness in his eyes, the grief that would never fully heal but had softened into something bearable. As the night wore on, Silas began to tell Clara stories too, about Eleanor, about the ranch when it was young and full of promise, about mistakes he had made and lessons he had learned. "Your mother sounds like she was wise," he said, "teaching you to work, to stand up for yourself, to never beg. Those are hard lessons for a child to learn. She knew she was dying. She wanted to make sure I would survive. She did more than that. She made sure you would thrive." Clara looked down at Lily, sleeping peacefully in her arms. "I hope I can do the same for her." "You already are." The clock ticked toward midnight, then past it. Clara knew she should sleep, knew tomorrow would be one of the most important days of her life. But she could not bring herself to leave this kitchen, this warmth, this family that had formed itself around the scarred wood of an old table. Finally, as the first hints of dawn touched the eastern sky, Silas stood. "Get a few hours of rest," he said gently. "You will need your strength." Clara carried Lily to their room and laid her in the small cradle Nathaniel had built during his first week home. She changed into her nightgown and climbed into bed, but sleep remained elusive. She kept thinking about her mother, about the last thing Anna had said before the fever took her completely. "Be brave, my darling. Be strong. And remember that love is not about blood. It is about who shows up when you need them most." Anna had been preparing Clara for this moment, teaching her that family was a choice, not just an accident of birth. Tomorrow, Clara would stand before a judge and fight for the family she had chosen, the family that had chosen her back. She fell asleep just as the sun rose and dreamed of open gates and warm kitchens and a future that was finally impossibly within reach. Morning came too quickly. Clara woke to find Silas already up dressed in his best suit. It was slightly too large on him now, as if he had lost weight over the years and never bothered to have it altered. Nathaniel wore city clothes that marked him as a man who had made something of himself in Chicago. He looked professional, confident, like someone a judge would take seriously. Clara had her new dress, the one Silas had given her for her birthday. It was simple but well made, and Beatrice had helped her press it the night before, so there were no wrinkles. She dressed carefully, braided her hair, and picked up Lily. The baby was in a good mood this morning, smiling and cooing at Clara's face. "You do not know what today means, do you?" Clara whispered. "You do not know that everything might change." Lily grabbed Clara's braid and pulled, gurgling happily. They ate breakfast in silence. No one had much appetite, but Silas insisted they eat something. "You need your strength," he said, echoing Clara's thoughts from the night before. The wagon ride to town felt both endless and too short. Every mile brought them closer to the courthouse, closer to the moment when everything would be decided. As they approached Miller's Crossing, Clara could see a crowd had already gathered. Word had spread about the hearing, and it seemed half the town had come to watch. Beatrice was there with Reverend Webb, Abigail and her parents. Even Mrs. Harrison, though Clara could not tell from her expression which side the woman favored. And standing apart from everyone else, dressed in expensive black silk that must have cost more than Silas earned in a year, was Eugenia. She watched their wagon approach with a small, satisfied smile, like she had already won and was just waiting for the formality of the judge's pronouncement. Clara felt her courage waver. Then Silas's hand found hers. "Remember what you told me," he said quietly. "Being scared does not mean giving up." Clara squeezed his hand and lifted her chin. They climbed down from the wagon and walked toward the courthouse together. Silas on one side, Nathaniel on the other. Clara in the middle holding Lily. A family, not by blood, but by choice. Whatever happened in that courtroom, they would face it together. Eugenia approached as they reached the courthouse steps. Up close, Clara could see the calculation in her eyes, the coldness that passed for confidence. "Clara, dear," she said in a voice like poisoned honey, "I hope you understand that this is for the best. You and Lily need proper care, a woman's touch, not this arrangement." "This arrangement saved our lives," Clara said. "Did it? Or did it simply delay the inevitable?" Eugenia's smile sharpened. "Your mother signed those papers, Clara. The law is quite clear. I am your legal guardian, and no judge in Nebraska is going to give 2 children to a stranger over their own blood." She turned to Silas. "I almost feel sorry for you, Mr. Callahan. You clearly care for the girls, but caring is not enough. The law is on my side, and you have already lost." Then she swept past them into the courthouse, her expensive silk rustling with every step. Clara felt ice settle in her stomach. What if Eugenia was right? What if all their fighting, all their preparation, all their hope was for nothing? Nathaniel must have seen the fear in her face. He crouched down to her level, meeting her eyes. "Listen to me," he said. "That woman wants you to be afraid, wants you to doubt. Because if you doubt yourself, you lose before the hearing even starts." He put his hands on her shoulders. "But you are Clara Lawson. You walked 40 miles through snow to save your sister. You survived when everyone said you would not. You made me believe my father deserved a second chance. Do not let her take that strength away from you." Clara nodded, feeling some of her courage return. They walked into the courthouse together, ready to fight for everything that mattered. The hearing room was smaller than Clara had imagined. Wooden benches, a desk for the judge, a witness stand, windows that let in cold morning light. It looked like an ordinary room, not like a place where lives would be decided and futures determined. Judge Morrison, no relation to the doctor, was already seated behind his desk. He was an older man with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. He studied the assembled parties with the detached interest of someone who had seen every kind of case humanity could produce. "We will keep this proceeding orderly," he said as everyone took their seats. "Mrs. Whitfield, you are petitioning to enforce your guardianship of Clara and Lily Lawson. Mr. Callahan, you are petitioning for guardianship of the same children. Both of you will have the opportunity to present your case. I will hear testimony from relevant witnesses. Then I will make my decision based on what I believe to be in the best interest of the children." He looked directly at Clara. "Young lady, you may also be called to testify. Do you understand what that means?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Good. Let us begin." Eugenia's lawyer stood first. He was a slick-looking man with oiled hair and a practiced smile. He presented the guardianship papers Anna had supposedly signed, complete with signatures and an official seal. "These documents clearly establish Mrs. Whitfield as the legal guardian of both children," he said. "There is no ambiguity here. The mother's wishes were clear." Then he began to paint a picture of Eugenia as a devoted aunt who had made difficult choices out of necessity, who had been heartbroken to send the girls away but had no other option given her financial situation, who had been searching for them ever since Clara ran away. It was masterfully done, lies mixed with just enough truth to be believable. When it was Amos Fletcher's turn, he came out swinging. Your Honor, I would like to call Dr. Morrison to the stand. The doctor took his seat and swore his oath. Then Fletcher began his questioning. Dr. Morrison, you treated Anna Lawson during her final illness. I did. And were you present when she signed the guardianship papers Mrs. Whitfield has presented? Yes. Can you describe Mrs. Lawson's condition at that time? The doctor shifted uncomfortably. She was in the final stages of pneumonia. High fever, severe pain drifting in and out of consciousness. I had given her morphine to manage the symptoms. In your medical opinion, was Anna Lawson capable of understanding what she was signing? A long pause, then, no. She was not capable of meaningful consent at that time. Eugenia's lawyer jumped to his feet. Objection. The witness is not qualified to determine legal capacity. He is qualified to determine medical capacity, Fletcher shot back, which is relevant to whether the signature was given voluntarily. Judge Morrison held up a hand. I will allow it. Continue, doctor. I expressed concerns to Mrs. Whitfield, the doctor said. Told her that her sister was in no condition to sign documents. Mrs. Whitfield assured me it was a simple formality, something Anna would want even in her diminished state. He looked down at his hands. I should have been more insistent, should have refused to witness the signature. That is a regret I will carry for the rest of my life. Eugenia's face had gone pale. Her lawyer was whispering urgently in her ear. Fletcher pressed his advantage. So, to be clear, Anna Lawson signed those papers while under the influence of morphine, barely conscious and unable to understand what she was agreeing to. That is correct. And you witnessed this signature despite your medical opinion that she was not capable of consent. Yes. To my shame, yes. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Morrison gavelled for silence. When order was restored, Fletcher called his next witness. Beatrice took the stand and testified about the condition Clara and Lily had been in when they arrived at Silas's ranch, about the care they had received, about the transformation she had witnessed over the past months. These children were dying, she said bluntly. Clara's feet were black with frostbite. Lily was hypothermic and malnourished. If Silas had not taken them in, they would be dead. That is not an exaggeration. That is simple fact. Reverend Webb testified next, speaking to Silas's character, to the change he had seen in the man over the past months, to the way the community had rallied around this makeshift family. But the most powerful moment came when Fletcher called Clara to the stand. She handed Lily to Nathaniel and walked to the witness chair on legs that trembled. The judge looked down at her with an expression that might have been kindness. Miss Lawson, you understand you are under oath. Yes, Your Honor. Then please tell me in your own words what happened after your mother died. Clara took a deep breath and began to speak. She told the truth, all of it. Her mother's death, Eugenia's coldness, the coach ticket and the decision to run, the 14 doors, the walk through snow, Lily's near death, Silas's kindness. She did not cry, did not beg, just spoke clearly and honestly about what she had experienced and what she had learned. When she finished, the courtroom was silent. Then Eugenia's lawyer stood for cross-examination, and the real battle began. Eugenia's lawyer circled the witness stand like a predator assessing prey. He had a folder in his hands, thick with papers that rustled ominously as he moved. Miss Lawson, he began, his voice smooth as oil. You have told us quite a story, a tale of hardship and survival, very moving. Clara said nothing. Fletcher had taught her not to respond to statements disguised as questions. But I wonder if we might examine some of the details more closely. You say you walked 40 miles through snow. A 10-year-old child carrying a baby. 40 miles. That seems improbable, does it not? I walked until I could not walk anymore. Then I walked some more. I do not know if it was exactly 40 miles, but it was a very long way. And you claim you knocked on 14 doors before arriving at Mr. Callahan's ranch. I did knock on 14 doors. That is not a claim. That is what happened. The lawyer's smile thinned. Yet we have been unable to locate a single person who remembers turning you away. Strange, is it not, that no one recalls a child with a baby begging at their door in December? Clara felt her stomach drop. Of course they could not find anyone. Most of those houses had been miles apart, scattered across the prairie. She had not known the names of the people who lived there, had barely seen their faces before the doors closed. I did not get their names, she said carefully. I was focused on finding help for my sister. How convenient. An unverifiable story of rejection to make Mr. Callahan's acceptance seem more heroic. The lawyer turned to the judge. Your Honor, we have only this child's word that any of this happened the way she claims. Fletcher was on his feet. Your Honor, the physical evidence supports Clara's testimony. Dr. Morrison documented severe frostbite on her feet and malnutrition in both children. Those injuries are consistent with prolonged exposure. Injuries that could have been sustained in any number of ways, Eugenia's lawyer countered. The child admits she ran away from the coach. She could have wandered for days before finding Mr. Callahan. She could have fabricated the entire story about 14 doors to justify her choice to run. Judge Morrison leaned forward. Miss Lawson, why did you run away from the coach? Clara met his eyes directly. Because I overheard people talking at the station. They said the county orphanage separated siblings, sent babies to one family and older children to another. I could not let that happen to Lily. She is all I have left of my mother. All I have left of my family. So you chose to risk both your lives rather than trust the system designed to help you? The question stung because it was fair. Clara had made a choice that could have killed them both, had nearly killed them both. I chose to keep my family together, she said quietly. My mother's last words to me were to take care of Lily no matter what. I was trying to honor that. Something shifted in the judge's expression, but he gave no indication of his thoughts. Eugenia's lawyer pressed on. Let us talk about your relationship with Mr. Callahan. You have been living in his house for how long now? 3 months. 3 months. Living alone with a man you do not know, with no female supervision, no proper chaperone. Mrs. Brennan visits often. Reverend Webb has been to the house multiple times. We are not alone. But at night, when these witnesses are not present, what happens then? Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks. Not from guilt, but from anger at the implication. At night, I sleep in my room with my sister. Mr. Callahan sleeps in his room. We are a family. A proper family. There is nothing inappropriate happening. You are 10 years old. How would you know what is appropriate or inappropriate? Fletcher objected loudly. Your Honor, this line of questioning is offensive and inappropriate in itself. My client is attempting to impugn Mr. Callahan's character without a shred of evidence. Sustained, Judge Morrison said sharply. Move on, counselor. But the damage was done. The seed of doubt had been planted in the courtroom. Clara could feel it in the uncomfortable shifting of the spectators in the way some people would not meet her eyes. Let me ask you directly, Miss Lawson. Has Mr. Callahan ever touched you inappropriately, ever made you uncomfortable in any way? No, never. Has he ever asked you to do anything that felt wrong? No. Has he ever threatened you? Told you what to say today? No. He told me to tell the truth. That is what I am doing. The lawyer flipped through his folder. I have here a statement from Mrs. Harrison, a prominent member of the community. She states that when she first encountered you and Mr. Callahan at church, she had serious concerns about the propriety of the arrangement, that Mr. Callahan became defensive when questioned, that you yourself seemed unusually protective of him. Does that sound accurate? Mrs. Harrison was rude and judgmental. She made assumptions without knowing anything about our situation. I defended Mr. Callahan because he deserved defending. Or because you have been coached to defend him. Because you have been told that your continued comfort depends on supporting his claim to guardianship. Clara's hands clenched in her lap. That is not true. Is it not? You say Mr. Callahan saved your life, that you owe him everything. Is it not possible that you feel obligated to support him, that you are afraid of what will happen if you tell the truth about your situation? I am telling the truth. Are you? Or are you telling the story you think will let you stay in a comfortable home rather than face the alternative? Clara's voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. The alternative is going back to my aunt, a woman who threw us out in winter, who cares more about money than about her own family. I would rather live in a barn than go back to her. Eugenia made a small wounded sound from her seat, the performance of a hurt relative. The lawyer seized on Clara's words. So you admit you are biased against Mrs. Whitfield, that you would say anything to avoid being placed in her care. I am not biased. I am honest. There is a difference. Is there? From where I stand, Miss Lawson, you are a child who ran away from proper care, concocted a dramatic story to justify that choice, and latched onto the first person who showed you kindness. You are not thinking clearly about what is in your best interest. That is why we have guardianship laws, to protect children from their own poor judgment. Fletcher was objecting again, but Clara barely heard him. Her vision had narrowed to the lawyer's smug face, to the casual cruelty of his dismissal. She had walked 40 miles, had nearly frozen to death, had watched her sister stop breathing and come back, had built a life from nothing but determination and hope. And this man was calling it poor judgment. You do not know anything about me, Clara said, her voice shaking with fury. You do not know what I have survived, what I have done to keep my sister alive. You stand there in your expensive suit and you judge me for running away, but you have no idea what it is like to have no choices, to have no one, to be so desperate that walking into a blizzard seems like the only option. Miss Lawson, no. You asked me questions. Now you will hear my answers. Clara was on her feet now, her hands gripping the edge of the witness stand. My mother died in my arms. Do you know what that is like? To watch someone you love more than anything slip away and not be able to stop it. To make promises to a dying woman that you have no idea how to keep. The courtroom had gone absolutely silent. I promised my mother I would take care of Lily, that I would keep us together no matter what. So when my aunt put us on that coach, I kept my promise. I got off. I walked. I knocked on doors. And when Mr. Callahan answered, he did not see a burden or a problem or free labor. He saw 2 children who needed help. And he helped us. Clara's voice dropped to something quieter but no less intense. You want to talk about poor judgment. My aunt had poor judgment when she sent us away. Those 14 families had poor judgment when they closed their doors. You have poor judgment now trying to twist kindness into something ugly. But Mr. Callahan, his judgment was perfect. He saw 2 children who needed a home, and he gave us one. He saw a family that needed building, and he built it. That is not poor judgment. That is love. She sat down, her whole body trembling. She had said too much, had let emotion overwhelm her the way Fletcher had warned her not to. But she had also told the truth. The lawyer opened his mouth to continue, but Judge Morrison held up a hand. I think we have heard enough from this witness for now. He looked at Clara, and his expression was unreadable. You may step down, Miss Lawson. Clara walked back to her seat on legs that barely held her. Nathaniel gripped her shoulder as she sat down. Silas said nothing, but his hand found hers under the table and held on tight. Judge Morrison turned to Eugenia. Mrs. Whitfield, I have some questions for you as well. Please approach. Eugenia stood smoothing her expensive dress. Of course, Your Honor. The court has reviewed your financial records as submitted by Mr. Callahan's attorney. You are currently insolvent. Your husband's business ventures have failed, leaving you with significant debts. Is that correct? We have had some financial difficulties, yes, but that does not affect my ability to care for my nieces. Does it not? You testified that you sent Clara and Lily away because you could not afford to keep them. Yet now, you want custody. What has changed? Eugenia's composure slipped slightly. I have made arrangements, found resources that were not available before. Resources, Judge Morrison repeated. Would those resources happen to include the 50 acres of land Clara and Lily inherited from their mother? Silence. Mrs. Whitfield, I have documents here indicating that you have already entered into negotiations with the railroad company regarding that land. Negotiations that include a purchase price of $20,000, a sum that would more than cover your debts and provide a comfortable living for years to come. Eugenia's face had gone pale. I was simply exploring options for the children's benefit. For the children's benefit. I see. The judge's voice was cold now. And when were you planning to inform the children about this sale? When were you planning to give them any say in what happened to their inheritance? They are children. They cannot make such decisions. No, but their legal guardian can, which is precisely why you want custody, is it not? Not to provide care or love or stability, but to access funds you desperately need. Eugenia's lawyer stood. Your Honor, my client's financial situation is not on trial here. It is when it speaks directly to her motivations for seeking custody. Judge Morrison shuffled papers on his desk. I have also received testimony from several of Mrs. Whitfield's neighbors in Omaha. They paint a picture quite different from the devoted aunt you have presented. Multiple witnesses report hearing arguments between you and your husband about the cost of caring for Anna's children. One witness recalls you saying, and I quote, "Those brats are eating us out of house and home. They need to go." That was taken out of context, Eugenia protested. Was it because it seems to align perfectly with what Clara described, an aunt who viewed her nieces as burdens, who sent them away at the first opportunity, who only came looking for them when she realized they represented financial salvation. Judge Morrison leaned forward. Mrs. Whitfield, let me ask you directly, do you love these children? Eugenia opened her mouth, then closed it. Her lawyer whispered urgently in her ear. I am their family, she finally said. I have a duty to them. That is not what I asked. I asked if you love them. Another long silence. I am prepared to provide for them, Eugenia said stiffly. Again, not what I asked. The courtroom watched as Eugenia struggled to find an answer that was both legally sound and emotionally acceptable. She could not. The truth was written on her face for anyone to see. She did not love Clara and Lily, had never loved them, saw them as tools, not children. Judge Morrison sat back. I have heard enough. I am ready to make my ruling. Clara's hand found Silas's. On her other side, Nathaniel leaned forward, tense with anticipation. This case has required me to balance several competing interests, the judge began. The law's preference for blood relations, the children's stated wishes, the documented evidence of care and neglect, the financial motivations of the parties involved. It has not been an easy decision. He paused, letting the tension build. However, after careful consideration, I find that the guardianship papers signed by Anna Lawson are invalid. Dr. Morrison's testimony establishes that she was not of sound mind at the time of signing. She was under the influence of morphine, in severe pain, and unable to understand what she was agreeing to. Any signature obtained under those circumstances cannot be considered valid consent. Eugenia's face crumpled. Her lawyer immediately stood. Your Honor, we intend to appeal. You may certainly try, but I suspect you will find it difficult to overturn a ruling based on medical testimony about the signatory's incapacity. Judge Morrison turned to Silas. Mr. Callahan, your petition for guardianship is granted. You are hereby appointed legal guardian of Clara and Lily Lawson with all the rights and responsibilities that entails. The courtroom erupted. People were talking, crying, shouting. Clara heard Beatrice's voice, raised in thanks, heard Reverend Webb offering prayers of gratitude. But all she could focus on was Silas's face, the way relief and joy and disbelief were all warring for dominance, the way tears were streaming down his weathered cheeks. We won, she whispered. We actually won. Silas pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. Nathaniel wrapped his arms around both of them, and they stood there in the middle of the chaos, a family united. Judge Morrison gavelled for silence. Mrs. Whitfield, you are ordered to cease all contact with the Lawson children. Any attempt to circumvent this ruling or to harass the Callahan family will result in contempt charges. Do you understand? Eugenia said nothing. She gathered her things with stiff, jerky movements and walked out of the courtroom without looking back. Her dreams of financial salvation walked out with her. Clara felt no triumph at her aunt's defeat, only relief that the threat was gone. Amos Fletcher approached with a wide smile. Congratulations, I will file the official paperwork this afternoon. As of now, you are legally Clara Callahan and Lily Callahan. Clara Callahan. The name felt strange and wonderful on her tongue. Thank you, Silas said, shaking the lawyer's hand. For everything. Thank the judge. He saw through Mrs. Whitfield's act and ruled based on what was best for the children. That does not always happen. The crowd pressed in, then everyone wanting to offer congratulations. Mrs. Harrison was there, her expression sheepish. I owe you an apology, she said to Clara. I was wrong to judge. Wrong to assume. You were right when you called me out at church. I am sorry." "Thank you," Clara said simply. She had learned that some people needed to be forgiven even when they did not deserve it. More people came. Abigail threw her arms around Clara, squealing with delight. Her parents shook Silas's hand and welcomed him properly into the community. Even people who had been skeptical before now offered their support. It took an hour to extract themselves from the courthouse. When they finally made it to the wagon, Clara climbed up and just sat, letting the reality of what had happened wash over her. They were safe, legal, protected by the law instead of threatened by it. They were a family. The ride home was quiet but joyful. Lily, picking up on the mood, cooed and giggled in Clara's arms. Nathaniel and Silas talked about plans for the spring planning, about expanding the ranch, about the future they could now build without fear. Clara leaned back and watched the familiar landscape roll by. The fields she had walked through in desperation were now the fields of home. The gate she had nearly died at was now the gate that marked the boundary of family. When they reached the ranch, Beatrice and Reverend Webb were already there along with half the town. Someone had organized a celebration, spreading word even before the official ruling came down. Tables had been set up in the yard. Food appeared from everywhere, dishes carried by neighbors who wanted to mark this moment. Music started and people began to dance. Clara found herself swept into the celebration, passed from person to person, each one offering congratulations and welcome. She was part of the community now, not just a temporary fixture, but a permanent member. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Reverend Webb called for everyone's attention. "We are gathered here to celebrate more than just a legal victory," he said. "We are celebrating family, the kind of family that is chosen, not born. The kind of family that is built on love and sacrifice and determination." He gestured to Clara, Silas, and Nathaniel. These three people found each other when they needed it most. A man who had lost hope. A boy who had lost his way home. A child who had lost everything. Separately, they were broken. Together, they are whole. Clara felt tears streaming down her face, but they were good tears. Happy tears. "I would like to perform an informal adoption ceremony," Reverend Webb continued. "Nothing legally binding, since that has already been handled by the court, but a spiritual recognition of what has already happened in the heart." Silas nodded, too moved to speak. The Reverend placed one hand on Clara's head and one on Silas's shoulder. "Silas Callahan, do you accept Clara and Lily as your daughters? Do you promise to love them, protect them, and guide them as long as you live?" "I do." Silas's voice was rough with emotion. "With everything I have." "Clara, do you accept Silas as your father? Do you promise to honor him and trust him and let him into your heart?" Clara looked up at the man who had saved her life, who had fought for her, who had proven that family was about choice, not blood. "I do," she whispered. "Forever." Reverend Webb smiled. "Then, by the power vested in me by God and the community, I declare you father and daughter. What has been joined in love cannot be separated." The crowd erupted in applause. Silas lifted Clara into his arms, holding her the way he had held her that first night when she could barely stand. But this time, it was not about survival. It was about love. The celebration continued late into the night. Clara danced with Nathaniel, with Reverend Webb, with her friend Abigail. She ate until she was stuffed and laughed until her sides hurt. And when the last guests had finally gone home, when the yard was quiet again, Clara stood at the gate with Silas. "You fixed it?" she said, running her hand along the smooth wood. Had to. Could not have the entrance to the Callahan Ranch looking broken. It was broken when I found it. I was broken too. We fixed each other. Silas put his arm around her shoulders. Yes, we did. They stood in comfortable silence, looking out at the dark fields under a sky full of stars. What happens now? Clara asked. Now we live. We work the ranch. We raise Lily. We build a life. Just like that. Just like that. Clara smiled. After months of uncertainty, of fighting and fear, the simplicity of that answer was perfect. They went inside together, and Clara checked on Lily one last time before bed. The baby was sleeping peacefully, her tiny fists curled against her cheeks. You are safe now, Lily, Clara whispered. We both are. We have a father and a brother and a home. We have everything Mama wanted for us. She climbed into bed and fell asleep, almost instantly exhausted but content. The years that followed brought their share of challenges. Droughts and harsh winters, illness and injury, the normal difficulties of life on a ranch. But they faced everything together as a family. Clara excelled in school, eventually becoming the first person in Miller's Crossing to attend the Territorial University. She studied to be a teacher, driven by a desire to help other children who felt lost and alone. Lily grew into a bright, curious child who followed Clara everywhere and called Silas Papa with absolute certainty that he had always been her father. Nathaniel married Miss Peterson, the school teacher who had replaced the one who moved east. They built a house on the edge of the ranch property. Their children, 2 boys and a girl, called Clara aunt and Silas grandfather, and the family continued to grow. And Silas transformed from a broken man existing in the shadow of grief into someone fully alive again. He laughed more, worried less, let himself be happy. 10 years after Clara first walked through that gate, she stood in the same spot with a group of students. She was 20 now, newly graduated, and about to start her first teaching position in Miller's Crossing. She had brought her students to the ranch for a final lesson before the summer break. The gate looked different now, freshly painted white with new hinges that did not squeak, and above it hung a sign carved in elegant letters, Callahan Hope Home for Children. Founded 1885. This is where my life changed, Clara told her students, gesturing to the gate. 10 years ago, I stood here with my baby sister, freezing and desperate and terrified. I had knocked on 14 doors that closed in my face. This was number 15. The students listened rapt. They ranged in age from 8 to 15, and several of them wore the same expression Clara had once worn. The look of children who had known hardship. The man who lived here could have sent us away, should have sent us away really. We were strangers, not his problem. But he opened the door anyway. Do you know why? A young boy raised his hand. Because he was kind. Yes, but more than that. Because he understood something important. That family is not just about blood. It is about choice, about showing up when someone needs you, about opening doors instead of closing them. Clara looked back at the house where Silas was playing with Lily, now 11 years old and full of energy, where Nathaniel was helping his pregnant wife into a chair on the porch, where 3 generations of chosen family were building a life together. But that was not all she saw. 5 other children ran in the yard. Michael, age 9, who had been orphaned when cholera took his parents. Sarah and Emma, twin sisters of 7, whose father had abandoned them at a church. Thomas, 14, who had run away from an abusive uncle. And little Grace, just 6, who had been found wandering alone on the prairie. The gate was broken when I found it, Clara continued. And in a way, so was I. So was the man who lived here. But we fixed each other. We built something new from our broken pieces. That is what I want you to remember. That it is never too late to change. Never too late to let someone in. Never too late to become a family. She pointed to the sign above the gate. 2 years ago, my father and I decided to open our home to other children who needed a place to belong. Children like I was. Lost, scared, alone. We have helped 17 children so far. Some stayed a few months and found families of their own. Some are still here. All of them know they have a place they can always come back to. A family that will never turn them away. One of her students, a quiet girl named Margaret, who reminded Clara of herself, spoke up. What happened to your aunt? Did she ever come back? No. She died 3 years ago, still in debt, still bitter. Clara's voice was gentle. I felt sorry for her in the end. She had a chance to be part of something beautiful, and she chose money instead. That was her loss, not ours. Clara turned back to face her students. The first lesson I want you to learn as you leave my classroom is this. Every day you will face gates. Some will be closed, some will be open, some will be broken. But the most important decision is what you do when you reach them. Do you give up after 14 tries, or do you knock on door number 15? The students nodded, understanding dawning in their eyes. And when you are on the other side of the gate, when you are the one with the power to open or close it, remember this moment. Remember that the stranger at your door might become your family, that the burden you take on might become your greatest blessing. That saying yes when it would be easier to say no is how we change the world one life at a time. Silas walked over Lily, skipping beside him. He had aged in the past 10 years, his hair now completely gray, his face more lined. But his eyes were bright and clear, no longer haunted by loss. Behind them came the other children laughing and chattering, followed by Nathaniel carrying his youngest on his shoulders. Are you filling these children's heads with stories again? Silas asked with a smile. Just telling them the truth. The truth, Silas repeated. He looked at the students. You want to know the real truth? The day this girl knocked on my door, I almost did not answer. Almost let her freeze out here because I was too wrapped up in my own pain to see someone else's. But something made me open that door. He paused, his voice growing softer. Maybe it was fate. Maybe it was God. Maybe it was just the memory of my wife telling me not to close my heart. Whatever it was, opening that door was the best decision I ever made. He put his arm around Clara. It gave me back my son. It gave me 2 daughters. It gave me 5 more children who needed a home. It gave me grandchildren. It gave me a reason to wake up in the morning and a reason to give thanks at night. Silas looked directly at Clara's students. So, yes, tell them about gates and choices and family. Tell them that one decision can change everything. Because it is true. The day I chose to open my door, I chose to live again. And that has made all the difference. Clara leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of the man who had become her father in every way that mattered. Thank you, she whispered, for everything, for opening the door, for fighting for us, for teaching me what family really means. Thank you, Silas replied, his voice thick with emotion, for knocking, for not giving up, for showing an old man that it is never too late for second chances. You saved me, Clara. By giving me the chance to be a father again, you saved my life, just as surely as I saved yours." They stood together as the sun set behind them, casting long shadows across the fields. The gate stood open as it always did now, a symbol of welcome, a promise that no child would ever be turned away. In the distance, the sound of children's laughter drifted from the house. The current residents of the children's home were setting the table for dinner, a nightly ritual that brought everyone together. Beatrice Brennan was there too, having become an unofficial grandmother to every child who passed through those doors. Clara looked at her students one last time. "Class dismissed. Go home to your families and tell them you love them. Because family, whether you are born into it or you build it yourself, is the most precious thing you will ever have." The students dispersed, chattering among themselves about the lesson. Clara watched them go, hoping they had learned something valuable, hoping they would remember that gates could open, that families could be built. That hope was always worth fighting for. Lily tugged on her hand. "Clara, come inside. Papa and I made your favorite for dinner. I will be right there." Clara stood alone at the gate for one more moment, remembering the snow, the fear, the desperate hope that had carried her through 40 miles of frozen hell, her mother's last words, the 14 doors that closed, the 15th that opened. She remembered Eugenia's cold eyes and colder heart, the courtroom battle that could have ended so differently, the moment when the judge said, "Granted," and their whole world changed. But most of all, she remembered her mother's final words. "Be brave, my darling. Be strong. And remember that love is not about blood. It is about who shows up when you need them most." Silas had shown up, had opened the door when everyone else closed theirs, had chosen to love when it would have been easier to turn away. And in doing so, he had not just saved Clara's life, he had taught her the most important lesson she would ever learn, that a single act of kindness could change the world. That family was built, not born. That hope was worth fighting for, even when everything seemed lost. Clara took one last look at the gate, at the sign that now hung above it, at the home that had grown from one desperate knock into something that touched dozens of lives. Then she turned toward the house where her family waited. The gate that had once been broken now stood strong and true, open wide to welcome anyone who needed shelter. Just as it would remain for as long as the Callahan family owned this land. A promise, a legacy, a testament to the power of opening doors instead of closing them. Dinner that night was chaos in the best possible way. 15 people crowded around the long table Silas and Nathaniel had built to accommodate their growing family. Clara sat between Lily and little Grace, helping the younger girl cut her meat while listening to Michael tell an elaborate story about catching frogs in the creek. And then the biggest one jumped right into Sarah's bonnet, Michael exclaimed, making the twins dissolve into giggles. "It did not," Sarah protested, but she was laughing too hard to sound convincing. Silas sat at the head of the table, Nathaniel at the other end with his wife beside him. Between them sat the patchwork family they had created. Some would leave, eventually finding permanent homes of their own. Others, like Thomas, would stay and work the ranch, becoming part of the family forever. After dinner, as they did every evening, they gathered in the parlor. Silas read aloud while Clara played the piano Eleanor had left behind, finely tuned and cared for again. The children settled on the floor on chairs and laps, listening to stories of adventure and hope. When the younger ones had been put to bed, Clara found herself once more on the porch with Silas. It had become their ritual, these quiet moments at the end of the day. 17 children, Silas said softly. Can you believe it? 17 lives changed, Clara replied. Because you opened a door. We opened it together. He put his arm around her shoulders. I may have let you in, but you taught me why it mattered. You showed me that saving one life can ripple out and save many more. Clara leaned her head against his shoulder. Mama would be proud of both of us. I think she would. Silas looked up at the stars. Eleanor, too. This is what she wanted, for the house to be full of life again, for love to echo through these rooms instead of silence. They sat in comfortable quiet, watching the night settle over the prairie. Somewhere an owl called. In the barn, horses shifted and settled. Inside the house, children dreamed of tomorrow. I love you, Pa, Clara said, simple words but weighted with 10 years of meaning. I love you too, daughter. Silas's voice was rough with emotion. More than I ever thought possible. You and Lily and all the rest. You are my second chance, my redemption, my reason for living. Clara smiled in the darkness. We are your family. Yes, Silas agreed. You are my family, all of you, built not from blood, but from choice, from love that was given freely and accepted gratefully, and that makes it stronger than any other kind. The gate stood open, the door stayed unlocked, and the Callahan Hope Home for Children continued to grow one lost child at a time, because that was what family did. They showed up. They stayed. They opened their hearts and their homes to those who needed them most. And in doing so, they proved that the strongest bonds were not forged by blood, but by choice, by sacrifice, by love. Clara walked inside to the warmth, the laughter, the love that filled every corner of the home she had fought so hard to keep. Behind her, Silas followed, closing the door gently against the night. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new children who needed help, new stories to be written. But tonight they had this: a family united, a home filled with hope, a legacy that would outlive them all. And somewhere, Clara liked to think her mother was smiling. The gate stood open, the door stayed unlocked, and love freely given and gratefully received continued to change the world, one knock at a time.